In this video, I'm going to cover the importance or the significance of the Claude.md file, which is what Claude calls memory, right? Like this is how they, Claude Code, this is their concept of memory and how memory is retained and retrieved and used when you're working inside of Claude Code inside a specific file directory, right? And so just to show you what this looks like, I have created two exactly the same folders with the same content, except one has a file named Claude.md and the other has a file called overview.md. And I've opened up Claude, a session of Claude Code in both folders, and I'm going to ask the exact same question, which is, tell me about Anthropic's target personas. And this information lives in contexts, personas, and there's a whole bunch here. And this overview file is also exactly the same as Claude.md file, the only difference being obviously the name of the file. And I'll just show you what this looks like, and then we can kind of discuss why we're seeing a difference in terms of performance, and then I'll dig a little bit deeper into Claude.md and how it's useful and how you might want to use it. Great. So I'm going to send this message on this side with Claude, actually on this side with the overview file. And then quickly I'm just going to send this here, and we'll see both of these running at the same time. And so you can see on the right side, it's already started reading a lot of these persona files, right? It knows where to find these persona files in contexts, personas, right? So it's reading all of these. Here, it's just basing its answer. Claude is basing its answer on publicly available information. So I might say something like, look them up in this repo, or I won't say repo, I'll call it look them up in this folder, right? So starting to look for patterns, trying to find personas, trying to look for markdown files. Okay, great. So it has sort of it finally found all of the target personas from this folder, but again, it found it in research folder, right? Not the research was sort of the underlying research before we put them into, like, finalize the structure and put them into context. So it still didn't look up contexts. Okay, so with the overview file, without being named Claude.md, it first tried to give us an answer based on its sort of public knowledge, right? It's trained knowledge without actually looking anything up in the folder. Then I prompted it to specifically look in this folder, and then it found the research file and never gave us the actual files that we wanted, which was inside of context personas. So what happened here? Basically, Claude.md serves as a memory for any Claude Code session. And whenever you start a Claude Code session in a folder, it will always try to find a Claude.md file by default, right? And when Claude Code finds it, it actually reads the content of it and tries to understand what's going on in this folder, and then customizes its answer to the directions or additional context you provide in Claude.md. So in here, for example, we give the context repository structure, right? So the structure is here, and I say down here, personas directory, and I give it, this is where you can find it, right? And these are all the different personas, right? And so it immediately was able to go directly to that folder and then start looking at all of the markdown files in that folder. Whereas here, it didn't have that prior context because it never bothered to look up overview.md, right? It wasn't prompted to. And so then the Claude Code session or instance in this case really struggled to get the right context. And so Claude.md really is sort of your memory layer or instructions or whatever you want to call it that is preloaded into every Claude Code session depending on where you start your session, right? So this Claude.md file won't have any impact. It didn't have any impact in this folder because these are two different folders. Now, if there's like a parent-child hierarchy, so for example, let's say that this folder was inside of this folder, then Claude does recursively go up sort of the directory levels to its parent and then grandparent and so on and so forth, and tries to find Claude.md file. And it'll read it, but with the preference being given to the one that's most specific or the one that's most nested. So the most child-like, if that makes sense, the most embedded or nested Claude.md file is sort of preferred. So that will get loaded first and given preference. But that's what it looks like. Here I just gave it sort of the, so I'm actually just going to work primarily now. Here I gave it just the structural overview, right? But I can say something like critical. Let's say use, I'm going to come up with just a really silly example. Let's say use a lot of business jargon, especially ones that are used by, let's say, GTM professionals, right? That are slightly older. Not to be ageist, but let's see. Let's see what it says. Okay, great. So I'm just going to restart the Claude session. Tell me about, tell me your thoughts about how we have outlined hypothetical personas for Anthropic. This repo, let's just say. Now we have sort of this critical instruction in Claude.md, so you should use a lot of business jargon, especially maybe some of the older ones, right? So let's see what it says. Yeah, so here we go. Distinct personas, enterprise technical buyer. Oh, no, sorry. It starts here. So looking at the persona framework you've outlined, here are my thoughts. Clear segmentation by buying motion, consistent structure across personas, gaps at pressure test, missing the champion versus economic buyer dynamic. The bones are solid. You've got the right scaffolding, right? So you can start seeing some of this come through, and you can say something like, be incredibly verbose in your explanation and point out really obvious things, like you're mansplaining to someone who doesn't know GTM. So I'll save that. We'll try it again because I just want to really show that difference. So I'll use the same prompt. Tell me your thoughts about how we have outlined hypothetical personas. Okay, so you can already see that it's a lot more verbose. Okay, so you've correctly bifurcated the enterprise segment into technical buyer and business buyer personas. This is absolutely critical because, as we know in enterprise SaaS motion, the economic buyer, the person who signs the PO, is often a different stakeholder than the technical evaluator. So yeah, you can sort of see how it's a lot more verbose and it tries to explain things that maybe we would know already, right? And so you can give it user preference in Claude.md. You can give it obviously the project structure to quickly find where things are, where files reside. You can also give it user instructions in terms of, like, you can say things like, please don't use M dash, for example, or please don't use rhetorical questions when I ask you to draft something, right? Because those are like clear signs that I used AI to draft something. Or it might be something like, I like to be challenged, so don't sugarcoat things. Don't always praise me. Push my assumptions. Always ask questions, right? And so you can go a lot of different ways. And the best practice here is obviously not to put something that's super verbose and very long and very detailed in Claude.md. Always start simple and then start layering in more as you see that it's working. Oftentimes what I find is that people just kind of use Claude to prompt something to put directly into Claude.md, and then it doesn't actually work the way they want to. And if the file is really long, it's actually quite difficult to sort of roll that back, right? And so it's almost better to just like start simple and then adding more details as you start figuring out like what's working and what's not. Before I end this, I just also wanted to point you to this page on Claude Code, official documentation. It talks about managing Claude's memory. One thing that I wanted to point out is that there's actually different scopes of memory. So you can have it in a project. So in the folder, as I showed you, right, this only impacts having Claude.md in this folder only impacts when you're working with Claude Code in this folder, right? When you fire up a Claude session by typing Claude in this folder in the terminal. But you can also have a user memory, which then applies to all Claude Code sessions that use your user account. And then there's also project memory that is local. So for example, if you're using Git to work on this together with a bunch of your teammates, but you specifically have a way of working with Claude, then you would use this where you would store the Claude file in here, but name it claude.local.md, and this will only, the instructions or whatever you put in there, the context in Claude.md will only impact the Claude Code sessions that you run, not anyone else that also has access to this folder, right? You can also, another nice thing about sort of modularizing your Claude is that you can use here, you can reference other files inside of Claude. So you can say, inside of, sorry, Markdown. So you can say something like at like contexts, personas, for example, right? For personas or something like that, right? So what you can do is actually like break this up into multiple files. And the benefit of that is, one, you're modularizing things, so it's easier to sort of fix one part instead of fixing the whole thing. And then the second thing is this is all taking up the context window, right? In Claude Code, I think it's 200,000, right? 200,000 tokens, and so this is being loaded into that context window, and it is taking up a certain amount of tokens. And so if it's really, really long, then you should probably break it up and just reference files, and those files will be sort of broadened as they're relevant. Wait, all the files actually referenced will be loaded automatically. Sorry about that. What I meant to say was you can have like progressive loading in terms of not loading all the Claude.md context by actually having nested Claude.md. So every folder you can also put in a Claude.md here, and you can have like a separate set of instructions specifically for working with files in the context folder, right? So what happens is when Claude Code starts working with files that are inside of contexts, it'll actually look this up first and then get those instructions, and then also get pull this in. But this, the child Claude.md that is specifically in contexts folder will get preference. So that's sort of a way of breaking up your Claude memory to make sure that there isn't sort of this like bloat in terms of token usage or how much it takes up your tokens. Right, there's another thing where you can actually just use a / command to say memory, and then you can see it gives you the option to save it at the project memory level or the user memory level. I can say like project memory. And then I guess it just opens that file, and then you can edit it directly. So if you forget sort of like where things are, you can just do a slash command. Before they used to be able to like type a sentence, but I think they actually did away with that, and now it just opens the file. And all right, when you're first starting a folder, you're not going to have a Claude.md file in there, right? So one way is if you already have a bunch of files in there, you can easily just type in /init, and it will initialize a new Claude.md file with code-based documentation. It doesn't have to be code, it can be just MD files. Or you can just manually create a new file and call it Claude.md, and then type in whatever you want in there. It'll work exactly the same way. And lastly, there's modular rules that you can actually put in under rules. So you can have like the primary Claude.md, and then you can have rules and then more specific rules here. But this I don't actually use, and I would say this is probably more geared towards software engineers that might use this. So this is a little bit more advanced, and so I'm not going to cover it. But again, I'll share the link to this page if you are interested in learning more about Claude.md. So Claude.md is like super powerful. Obviously, you saw sort of the performance difference between not just the latency, not just the time of loading context, but also like the accuracy and finding the right places. So I always recommend setting up a Claude.md file, at least in your parent directory, and wherever it makes sense in your child directories or subdirectories inside of the root directory. And you will see that this really helps in terms of sort of system prompting Claude to sort of have the baseline context that you want to share with it as you're working together in a specific folder. Cool. So that's it for our coverage of Claude.md, Claude Code's way of maintaining memory. As always, please let me know if you have any questions, and hope you enjoyed this session.